Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with economic and financial news from around the world. Today's show, 17 years after its return to China, Hong Kong's growing pains persist, and soy's decline spells disaster for Argentina. First, the headlines. Japanese business confidence among manufacturers improved for the first time in 2 quarters as parts of the economy might finally be stabilizing. The Bank of Japan's quarterly Tankan survey showed big manufacturer sentiment improved by 1 point to plus 13 in September. Sentiment for the services sector, however, worsened more than expected, suggesting some companies are still struggling to shake off the impact of the sales tax hike in April. Given the mixed data, it remains unclear whether policymakers will expand fiscal and monetary stimulus ahead of a second sales tax hike in October 2015.
Looking at the results as a whole, the pullback in demand following the sales tax hike is easing, and the economy is continuing its path of moderate growth, according to the monthly report.
Annual inflation in the Eurozone weakened to a 5-year low in September, raising pressure on the trade bloc's central bank to increase stimulus. Annual Eurozone inflation was just 0.3% in September, down from 0.4% in August, and far below the ECB's target of a little below 2%. Consumer prices fell 0.2% on the year in Italy, confirming a deflationary trend in the Eurozone's third biggest economy. The bank meets on Thursday and is expected to refrain from additional measures after cutting rates to fresh lows in September and unveiling a new program to purchase private debt. Argentina deposited a $161 million bond interest repayment with a newly appointed local trustee on Tuesday, defying a U.S. court order. The central bank deposited the coupon payment with Nación Fideicomisos instead of former trustee Bank of New York Mellon. Argentina wants to show it can service its debt and that its failure in July to complete a payment was the result of adverse U.S. judicial rulings. U.S. District Judge Thomas Grisa has barred Argentina from servicing its restructured debt until it pays a small group of U.S. hedge funds that rejected the terms of bond swaps in 2005 and 2010. Grisa on Monday held Argentina in contempt and issued a warning that the government must stop trying to get around his rulings. More in Argentina following the headlines. Concern grows for Venezuela's economy, which is teetering on recession as annual inflation has risen to over 63%. Though popular social welfare projects from former President Hugo Chávez's 14-year rule are still in place, a lack of U.S. dollars due to strict currency controls has led to shortages of nearly a third of basic goods. Skyrocketing consumer prices, empty shop shelves, stalled construction projects, and a dip in industry all point to a contraction. And though official GDP data for 2014 is not available, some economists say Venezuela is already in recession.
2 salaries aren't enough to survive on. Due to the economic crisis, we can't put food on the table, and also we can't find anything to buy.
eBay plans to spin off its PayPal business into a separate, publicly traded company next year, which could spark a round of deal-making among potential rivals. PayPal is growing faster than eBay's core marketplaces unit and is on pace to overtake it by sales. By splitting off from eBay, one of the biggest online commerce sites, PayPal, which facilitates 1 in every $6 spent online, eliminates a natural conflict in trying to work more closely with brick-and-mortar shops. With 152 million users and a potential market capitalization estimated at $32 billion, PayPal could become an acquisition target for bigger players looking to expand in digital payments. Hong Kong has historically been one of China's most important trade gateways to the world. But following China's boom over the past 17 years, the little city-state has become increasingly more dependent on its giant mother country. Daniel Roth has more.
As China celebrates 65 years as the People's Republic, tens of thousands have taken to the streets in Hong Kong calling for democracy as part of the Occupy Central movement. Beijing, wanting to handpick appropriate candidates, it seems has gone back on an agreement to grant full democratic voting rights to Hong Kong residents by 2017. The protesters are calling for the city's chief executive to step down and for free and fair elections.
I want to tell people in China that no matter what, Hong Kong people want to maintain one country, two systems, and we want freedom and democracy.
When Hong Kong was handed from Britain to China in 1997, it accounted for 18% of China's economy. Now, 17 years later, it sits at 3%. During the nearly 2 decades of Chinese rule, Hong Kong has kept its currency, customs, legal system, and budget as an economic entity unto itself. This means that the drop in centrality in China's overall economy is likely due to China's massive tenfold growth, not negative changes in Hong Kong's economy, which grew, albeit by a fraction. Indeed, according to the World Economic Forum Competitive Index, Hong Kong ranks 7th and China at 29th. It seems now the people of Hong Kong want the power to choose leadership for the formidable city.
Joining us now is Asia business expert Tal Reshef for a look at the financial impact of the protests in Hong Kong. Mr. Reshef, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
So what would you say are the economic reasons underlying the protests right now in Hong Kong?
Well, the economic reasons are not very clear because the Chinese regime is taking some steps that are not, their interest is not very clear. What they are doing is that they start a move that seems like limiting the liberalism and the openness of the economy in Hong Kong, and it is not clear why. What does it serve? Because so far the cooperation between the British system in Hong Kong and the Chinese system in the mainland goes quite fine and serves both sides, so their interest is not very clear. It frightens the economic powers inside of Hong Kong, but it frightens not only economically because some are afraid that it may point to further things which are not only economic.
There have been suggestions made, though, that from the perspective of the people in Hong Kong itself, they've seen China essentially boom further and further and further since 1997, and their share, so to speak, of the China pie has only shrunk. I mean, is there any kind of fear coming from the people in Hong Kong itself that their the part they play in this China-Hong Kong deal, so to speak, is so minuscule that eventually they'll be irrelevant?
I'm not sure that they will be irrelevant because let's forget that even though the percentage is going down and down, it's going down and down not because Hong Kong is shrinking, it's because China is expanding dramatically. Hong Kong is expanding also slower, naturally, because it started from a higher point. But Hong Kong is doing very fine, and even today, for a region of only 5 million people, what it's doing is beautiful. It's one of the most prosperous in the world. Now, the intention of the Chinese to limit it raises questions. I do not see the economic interest behind it. Maybe they're afraid of democratic intentions that are growing in Hong Kong, and they want to put it under a tighter control. But maybe this is another possibility that should be taken into consideration. It's a result of the fights from inside of the party. We have to remember that many leaders from the Communist Party in China are coming from Shanghai. Shanghai is the opponent of Hong Kong, the new center, maybe even the bigger. And the more you put down Hong Kong, the more you open possibilities to Shanghai, to the people of those leaders that may be pushing in this direction.
Of course. Shanghai really does actually not have some of the basic pillars that make Hong Kong what it is in terms of the financial center of Asia. I mean, one of the financial centers of the world, really. With essentially China moving in on the stability factor here, what did it stand to gain from it?
This is the question that is not very clear. It might be pure intention to let Shanghai get bigger because Shanghai is the destiny. We have to remember that first of all, there are many other centers are part of those two. We have Shenzhen, we have Beijing, we have other centers, but those are the two main ones. Hong Kong serves as the gateway for the big world, because it's two systems in one country. You can make business inside of Chinese territory using the British regulation, the Western regulation, while in Shanghai you do it inside of mainland China in the Chinese way. So most of the activities of within the Chinese market are going inside of Shanghai. Most of those who go out to the big world that make Hong Kong the hub of Asia are from Hong Kong, that is used as a hub, as a gateway.
Okay, well, Mr. Tal Rashif, Asia business expert, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure, thank you.
As soybeans were once seen as the new gold bars in Argentina, the recent drop in price of soy on the international market forms a direct threat to Latin America's third largest economy. Here's the story.
Argentina has seen its share of economic hurdles in recent months, an ongoing problem. The South American country was forced into default on bond payments by a U.S. court order. But now, adding fuel to the fire, AFP reports that soy prices are dropping on the international market. The bean is a major export for Argentina.
Our first estimates for soybean is that we'll lose about $4 billion in the next crop because of the decrease in prices. At Buenos Aires, Rosario, Santa Fe, Entre Rios are provinces which main exports are soybean derivatives like flour and soy oil.
Indeed, the price of soy is at a 4-year low. It is also causing a decrease in Argentina's grain sales overall. For the third largest economy in Latin America, which relies heavily on agricultural exports, the situation is grim.
Agriculture accounts for 70% of Argentina's total exports. Soybean, which is the most emblematic and important for our country, generates $25 billion per year in exports.
The soy and corn harvest, which peaked in the second quarter, according to the Buenos Aires Herald, helped push GDP growth to 0.9% in that quarter. But the drop in prices and the seasonal shift away from the harvest mean that the growth is probably not a sign of a sustainable shift, and Argentinians are feeling it.
When prices decline, you feel the pinch because costs are the same or higher.
The Herald reports a jobless rate rise from 7.1 to 7.5%, and with financial troubles ranging from beans to bonds, Argentina has an uphill battle ahead.
Now for a look at some of the offbeat reports we found for you in Media Watch. Daniel Roth, thanks for joining us.
How's it going?
Good. So what do we have for you?
The first one is Bloomberg has this story looking at something that came out in This American Life and ProPublica about a woman named Carmen Segarra who was federal regulator with the New York Federal Reserve, who the New York Federal Reserve became the primary regulator in the United States of the financial market. And she taped 46 hours of interactions between regulators and bankers, between the finance industry and the government. And what she came out with and what's profiled in this American Life piece and the Bloomberg piece really covers it in summation, is that there isn't really regulation happening. She was fired after bringing this to the attention of her bosses. The kind of culture that they have in the Fed is one where you're supposed to keep your head down. You're supposed to not ask questions. She taped one reaction at one meeting where one of the bankers at Goldman Sachs said, once clients are wealthy enough, certain consumer laws don't apply to them. And afterwards, she noted to a more senior regulator, I can't believe they said this in a meeting, and the senior regulators said to her, "You didn't hear that." So it's no, really, and this is like a really. She's had 46 hours of this kind of tape. Kind of really proving that it's not a conspiracy theory, it's not crazy.
Right.
The regulations that supposedly are keeping the markets in check, keeping the financial industry not in need of bailouts after crashing markets, those regulations don't really exist because the regulators don't really regulate. And it's really out in the open in this story. It's really just there for the taking. The question that the Bloomberg piece really raises, though, is so what do we do with it?
Exactly. I was just going to say, what do we do with this? I mean, obviously, the people who have the most money have the most power, so to speak. How is this going to change their world or our world for that matter?
That's the billion-dollar question, really. That's, what do you do with this? And people kind of knew this before. Walking into 2008 and the crisis, people kind of knew this. But this is the smoking gun. This is recorded tape of regulators and bankers kind of sitting together joking about the end of the world.
I would imagine that people are just going to, these particular people are going to wait for it to sort of blow over and go back to business.
That's what they're going to hope anyways. And, the Occupy Wall Street movement was huge, but didn't result in any kind of arrests, any real changes. As you can see, the same sorts of games are going on. Debt continues to grow. Right. Unemployment, it's the whole underemployment, rather, which is the big deal these days. So it's a real question. So what do you do with this kind of information about regulators and bankers working together to not regulate?
Right. Okay. Well, I guess we'll find out eventually.
Eventually.
Thanks very much for that. That's a wrap for us at The Economy Magazine, your daily source for economic and financial reports. Benjamin Mitchell-Faris, thanks for joining us, and join us again tomorrow.